Next, we have Jesse Anderson, Managing Director at Big Data Institute. Jesse will be presenting the state of data engineering. In this session, Jesse will explore the history of the data industry from data warehousing to data science and provide insights into how data engineering can avoid the challenges faced by its predecessors. Please welcome Jesse Anderson to the stage. Welcome.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming. I really appreciate you taking the time to learn about the state of data engineering. And a quick warning, this talk is going to be offensive, will be offensive, but I'm hoping it will be so offensive that you will take action. Will you take action? I hope so. No? Then get out. I'm just kidding. Was that you? Okay. You know what? We mostly suck as an industry. And maybe suck is, maybe that doesn't translate. We're terrible as an industry. Do you know why? Well, let's talk about the ways. We have really high personnel costs because usually a data engineer will make more than a software engineer. You have high operation costs. In fact, the talk that was just before this was talking about, oh wow, these data centers, these hyperscalers are so expensive. We have to figure out a way to make this more cost efficient. Oh, and here to top it off, we have low success rates. How many of you have heard of the number that 85% of big data projects fail? It's true. That goes along with my experience as well. And then we have this whole problem of once it gets into production, we still have low value creation. Recipe for success? Who wants to go out and do a data project after reading this? Raise your hand. Okay, you don't. He still doesn't count. Just ignore him. He is now an outlier that we will ignore. Okay, well, maybe we are doing well. So this is a graph that I created based on some research and a survey that I did about value creation, of just how good are we at creating value. And you look at that graph and you say, oh, there's lots of 6, 7, and 8s. We must be doing good as an industry. But here's the one that should give you a lot of, keep you up at night, it keeps me up at night, is over time, we're actually creating lower value on average. Not significantly, but we are creating lower value on average. And you know what's really bad is we're actually a pretty young industry. What should be happening is it should be growing a little bit, or it should be staying the same, but creating lower value over time, that's bad. That's really bad. So, why is this happening? I spend a lot of my time thinking about why this is happening. And in order to do this, we're going to have to look back at history. We're going to look back at two parts of history. We're going to talk about the history of data warehousing and DBAs, database administrators. And then we're going to look at the history of data science. And we're going to look at parallels. Because it turns out, as much as we're all in data, I assume you're all in data, you know what we're really terrible about? Understanding data about ourselves, data about our industry. Because those two slides that you just saw, those don't exist anywhere else. They're only my research. No one has ever researched this the way that I have. God, I sound like Trump. I'm sorry. It is the best research ever. It's huge. It's beautiful. It was those graphs, the most beautiful ever. Thank you. So, in the early 2010s, who of you are old enough? I know he's old enough. Okay, she's old enough too. It turned out that when you hear about, when you're reading the news, DBA, data warehouse engineer, it was the sexiest job. It was the job that when you read the articles you read now, it was saying, hey everybody, go be a DBA. It's this great job. And so what happened was, how many of you have ever dealt with a data warehouse team or are a member of a data warehouse team because you're about to be offended? I call them the no team. Do you know why I call them the no team? Because if you ever want to be told no, something isn't possible, something can't be done, you just go to the data warehouse team. And I see a lot of heads shaking, and I've given this talk around the world, and every time I've always heard lots of head shaking. I've never heard anybody say, no, Jesse, you're wrong. We always say yes. We can always find a way. No, They always will tell you no. There is always a reason to say no. And I used to think it was a problem of a technology. I used to think, okay, it's Teradata, or it's Oracle, or it's something like that. I don't think so. I think as I saw that and went deeper, it's actually that the teams were not skilled enough. The teams did not have the skill. This is really, really important because we're going to see a pattern. There are certain patterns we're going to see over time as we go through these. The DBAs were not keeping up with new trends. If you ever talked to a DBA or a data warehouse team and you talked about something new, do you know what they would say? Never heard of it? Not going to work. Yep. See lots of heads shaking. Yes. Okay. You've dealt with them. Okay, good. So hopefully you're not too offended. So now we have our legacy, our poor designs. There was lots of problems that they had, but you know what? All of this boiled down to one core manifestation, and that is low value creation. The teams, the companies that did it, the companies that had data warehousing, they just did it out of necessity, everybody else. But I'm going to ask you a question that I've asked around the world. How many of you know of a startup that's been done in, let's say, the past 5 years that has a data warehousing team? Raise your hand. Nobody? Last 10 years? Ooh, there's a problem there. All of a sudden we have this team that everybody thought was really important. Now everybody who's starting a business is not even creating a data warehousing team. You know why? Because they say no, and they create low business value. It is a huge problem. There's a trend. There's a pattern. And I really want you to come away with this pattern. So a result, even now, even companies with data warehousing teams, and these are old companies usually, they either have no growth in their teams or they're reducing those teams. There's a lot of people that you'll know or meet that I've met who are former data warehouse people looking for their new job because they cannot find a new job. Companies are not hiring data warehouse engineers. Oh, okay. So that didn't work out too well. Now let's go to the next one. Mid-2010s, data scientist was the sexiest job. Looks like a lot of you are old enough to remember that. Who remembers that? Yep. Lots of, okay, more hands, good. Okay, you're about to be offended too. So I call the data science team the mistaken for team. They were mistaken for people who could write code. They can't. They suck at writing code. You know why? Because coding is not memorization of syntax. Coding is engineering. There's a huge difference between those two things. So they were mistaken for these unicorns, and this is what everything that was written. I didn't write this. I said this is wrong. But what was written is these data scientists, they can write code and they can create models. But you know what? They could create the models, they could do the math, they could not create the code. They could not engineer the systems. And so these unicorns did not exist. So what happened was, any data scientists in the room? Okay, a few of you? Okay, hopefully you're very offended right now because you spend a lot of your time on data engineering. But are you good at data engineering? No? So here's this problem. We have our data scientists thrown at a problem that they are not good at. And what I don't think we realize, and definitely managers don't realize this, is that when we throw people at something that they're really inefficient at, it doesn't make them try to work harder, it usually makes them quit. But I would say more importantly, it turns people who are full-time. And if you look at their inefficiency, I would say data scientists are 80% inefficient, 50% inefficient at data engineering tasks. It turns a person who's full-time into a person that's half-time because they are so inefficient at the task, you don't have this. So this is in another talk if you want to go show your manager and say, please understand this. This is a big part of why we are so inefficient as an industry, is we have 20-person, 10-person data science teams. What we actually have is 3-person, 4-person, 5-person, because you average it out and you look at their effectiveness. So our other key problem is, okay, so they're less efficient, so what? The problem is that these data science teams cannot get the data projects, the AI projects to the next level. They cannot get them into production. This is a whole different level of, or different type of success, different type of problem. It is an engineering problem. It is not a data science problem, and is often also an organizational problem. So, oh, there's a pattern here. Low business value creation, and now there's a glut of unqualified data scientists. Ooh, that's a problem, right? Do you know why? Because you've probably seen this. Maybe, how many of you are data scientists who are looking to become a data engineer? A few hands. Okay. So why are you doing that? Is it because there's a glut of people, of data scientists trying to find data science jobs, and now they're saying, oh, I guess I need to go do data engineering? There's a problem here. There's fewer hands up in this one. When I asked this question in London, it was about half those data scientists were there trying to make that switch. It is, I will tell you, it is possible to make the switch. Definitely possible. But it is not as much of a lateral move as you're thinking. It is a more difficult move. It is a difficult part of, you are going to have to write code and you are going to have to engineer things, and you have not had to be an engineer. One of the biggest keys I can tell you is the best data engineer on a data science team is still not the best data engineer, okay? You are just the best in a group of blind people, a group of people who don't know what they're doing. That doesn't mean that you're the best data engineer or a good data engineer. Hopefully you're very offended with that, but I'd say that to bring an action to you, to say, hey, guess what? You're going to really have to try it this one, and this may not be your forte, okay? So this unqualified data scientist, this is a problem, but a pattern. We see this pattern of low business value creation, and then we create this glut of people that aren't qualified. Well, let's try to avoid repeating our mistakes. How many of you people ever did this? Let's search and replace. Let's find every time that we said we're a database engineer, a DBA, and we'll replace that and we'll say, oh, I'm a data warehouse engineer. No change in skill, just search and replace. That works, right? Right? You can just do that on your resume and magically get technical skills, right? Because this is what we're doing now. This is what happened. A lot of data analysts search and replace. I'm no longer a data analyst. I'm now a data scientist. I didn't upgrade my skills. I knew the math part. That came along with the data science, or that data analyst part, but all that coding stuff, that's tough. I don't know. I can kind of figure out my way through that. I just search and replace, right? That works, right? Yeah? Nobody's shaking their head yes? Oh, maybe that doesn't work. Okay, so yes, it definitely is possible to make these switches, but just doing that, just watching some YouTube videos, that sort of thing, those don't get you anywhere. Those will make you waste a lot of time and a lot of effort. And this is what happens. We have people wasting their time because you're following some influencer on YouTube, some influencer out there. And guess what? These influencers have created an alternate reality. It's not reality. Do you know what those influences is important to them? Views, LinkedIn connections, followers. Do you know what's not important to them? Your success. Okay, it doesn't matter what matters is that metric of how many followers. It doesn't matter, oh, did you actually get that job? Did I lie to you and tell you that this is possible when it actually isn't possible? This is our problem. The influencer industry is creating part of this problem, and it's really saying that, or it's really fomenting that. Then we have vendors. So one of the issues we have with vendors is our vendors say, this is easy. You just use my product, right? So you just use Kafka and it makes it all easy, right? 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 Yeah? No? Okay, no. Well, no, it doesn't actually, because you still need to know your engineering. You still need to have hardcore data engineering. And you know what happens when companies don't do this? They create a solution that doesn't work. And this is part of that metric of why so many companies fail at this, is that they don't apply that hardcore engineering. They just follow what the vendor said. Let's follow that white paper. The white paper won't lie to me. That cloud provider will just tell me what to do, right? Guess what? It doesn't work that way. You still need engineers. So now data engineering is the sexiest job. How many of you have seen that? Yes? He was like, yes? Okay. And then you see this pattern like, okay, maybe not. Maybe this isn't a good pattern to have. Okay, we've all seen this, the data science, data engineering. Okay, I call them the confused team. Okay, so we've got all kinds of questions that we don't know the answer to. Okay, for example, I have my definition of data engineer. I've written a book, and I put my definition that I've had in there for years. But I bet if I were to ask all of you what your definition is, it would be different. I think perhaps everybody's definition would be different. And it's because we don't know what they do. How technical should they be? That's a really key one. What you have on two sides is you have some people saying, okay, it's just data warehouse engineer 2.0. They do a little bit more on Spark. They know a little bit more, slightly different SQL, but it's all SQL. Hey, that's going to work out well. And then over here, you have my definition where I'm talking about it's very software engineering focused. It is distributed systems. It is understanding data at core levels. So if you want to find out how this is going to work out, for example, that data engineer, that low-skilled, the lower-skilled SQL person, the analytics engineer is another part of that title. If you want to find out how this is going to work out, you just look at history. This is part of why I'm giving this talk around the world. If we look at history and you want to know what's going to happen with analytic engineer and low-skilled data engineer, we just have to look back at what happened with the DBAs, the data warehouse engineers. It doesn't work out well. It is not an issue of technologies and that sort of thing. It is an issue of skill. If you are limited to SQL as your only ability to query data, to deal with data, you will eventually have a problem. You absolutely need to be able to write code because you will need to do more complex things that are not possible with SQL. If you are limited to SQL, it is a very big limitation. Not saying not to use SQL, because there are certain things that SQL is so much better at, so much faster at. But if that is your only tool, you will eventually fail because you can't do the more technical things. And it isn't just an issue of can you code or not, it is can you create a system complex enough to deal with this? And this confusion is part of why we're having such a difficult time as an industry. So now what we have is search and replace. Data scientist, data engineer. So a few people raised your hands. Hopefully you're not doing this. But it's really key that those of you who are making this switch, or if you're interviewing somebody making this switch, that the best data scientist was not the best data engineer on that team. There's still a love of data, definitely. You understand your data, and you may bring something that's very interesting to that team, but know that the technical bar should be significantly higher than what you experienced as a data scientist. And so you know what's going to happen. Okay, let's see. We saw low value creation with data warehousing. Then we saw low value creation with data scientists. Okay, let's extrapolate that out. Low value creation. Oh, we're going to have a glut of unqualified data engineers that we probably already have right now. It's a big deal. This is a big problem. And this is already happening, unfortunately, where we are seeing that there are data engineers out there who are unable to get a job because they followed their favorite influencer who told them, just go learn some Airflow. Have you ever heard that before? I know I've seen that. There was somebody on LinkedIn saying, just go learn Airflow. That's all you need. How would you need more than that? Well, it turns out that that person does not know what they're talking about, oddly enough. Then we get into other things like Gen AI. So what often is happening is companies thinking, oh, I can just have a bunch of junior people. Those junior people can kick out a lot of code with Gen AI, right? Gen AI will deal with the easy or the difficult parts, like architecture, talking to people. That'll do it, right? Right? Yeah? No, it doesn't work that way. In fact, I think it's going to make the senior people more productive. But my experience also is that when Gen AI creates a bug, so if I've coded a lot with Gen AI, and what will happen is you can read it over and you can look it over, but that one time it creates a bug, the amount of time you have to spend trying to narrow down that bug is just a pain. And so you lost all that productivity, unfortunately. This is part of my research, once again, of Gen AI usage. But what I found interesting is a lot of people, I think it was, about a quarter of people, 25% of people, of teams were not using Gen AI at all. So I don't think we should not use Gen AI. I think it is helpful, but I think we should be more clear about when Gen AI is applicable. So lots of data teams not using this, but I would also say that there's some interesting parts we can do in data engineering itself to clean up unstructured data, to pull data out of unstructured data. If you haven't done that, there's some really interesting things you can use with Gen AI. But here's the core of the problem. When people talk about replacing us as software engineers, as data engineers with Gen AI, what they don't understand is businesses expect things to work 100% of the time, with 100% of the use cases, with 100% accuracy. And this is what makes data engineering and software engineering hard. What's hard is not writing the code. What's hard is not the syntax of it, your knowledge of syntax. What's difficult is trying to hit all three of those things at once. And this is where Gen AI has a lot of difficulty. It's because you have to have all this domain knowledge, and you have to have spoken to the business, and you have to have doing each one of these things at 100% is very difficult. So what I found is that Gen AI works in a few cases and works some of the time, but for those highly nuanced, very domain engineering specific, it doesn't work as well. So my advice to you is smart people, smart engineers, solve difficult problems and create value. If you're trying to figure out where do I fit in this whole Gen AI thing, how do I deal with this, it is smart people solve problems. And one of the things that I'll share with you is when we solve problems, solve an unsolved problem. And let me help you understand what unsolved problems mean. An unsolved problem is something that only exists in your business. So in your company, there is a problem right now that can only be solved by you, but there are other problems that have been solved by other things. For example, let's say, as an example, go rewrite your own Spark. Why would you write your own Spark? Why would you write your own distributed system? Why would you write your own communication protocol? Those are solved problems. There is open source. There are libraries to go do these things. Those are solved problems. Pay the license fee. Use the open source, something like that. Focus on the unsolved problems, the things that are only in your business, the things that only you can solve because you are working on that day in and day out. This is the key. This is how smart engineers grow, and we solve problems, and we create business value. This is very, very key for all of you. So what should you do? So here is that graphic that I was telling you about before. If you want to say, okay, here, oftentimes data scientists will think, I'll just be a little bit inefficient at the tasks I do. So you see the big one there on the right. So if they're doing a bunch of tasks that are data engineering, you have, and they're 80% of their time at 20% efficiency of that. If they're 20% efficient at data engineering tasks, you actually have a third-time person. So that team of, let's say, 10 people, data scientists, you actually have the equivalent of 3 people working. It's that bad. Nobody's ever put it into these sorts of terms before. We just know that they're inefficient. Nobody's ever said, oh, this is why nothing gets done. You actually have a 3-person team. You need data engineers on that team. So if you're having this sort of problem, take a picture of this, send it to your boss, help them understand this. The other thing I'll talk about is optionality. So when we're talking about or making decisions as data engineers, one of the most important parts is options. So when two options that we're processing or thinking about are about equal, what we'll generally want to do is choose the option that gives us the most optionality, that gives us the most future benefit of this, or abilities. So what we need to do, an example of this is, let's say you're choosing Kafka, a pub sub system, or something like that. Now, what you want to do there is to choose one that gives you the most options. Do you do point-to-point, or do you do a pub sub, publish subscribe? Well, point-to-point is inherently option limiting because the data will only go from point A to point B. But if we put it into a pub sub, that will give us the ability to, later on, go from point A to point B, to point C, to point D, to point F, so on and so forth. That optionality will give us more benefits in the future. The other key is, as beginners, you tend to overgeneralize. And I see this a lot with Kafka once again, where companies and people will come away from a conference or learn about something new, and they'll say, how many of you are going to apply Spark to 1 gig of data coming out of this? Probably, maybe a few of you. You'll say, oh, I want to use Spark for that. Spark is terrible for a 1 gig file. Why? It's because you're overgeneralizing. You're overgeneralizing a technology. Here's this new technology, I will use it for everything. It is not, Spark is not great for that. Spark is terrible for that. So microservices is another good one. Not everything needed to be a microservice. We just overgeneralized it. Focus on those solved problems. That was one thing I talked about. Quit trying to solve problems that are solved. Solve your business's own problems. So that brings us to a question of what should we do? I'm going to share you a secret. And I've consulted for over 11 years now. And I'm going to share you the one secret that has made me be a good consultant. Okay? You ready? Ready? Sure? Okay. Talk to the business. Okay? Do you know why? Who talks to the business directly? A few of you? Okay. Okay, those of you who are individual contributors, do you talk to the business? Raise your hand. Just a few. So there's the problem. A lot of the people that were talking to the business, those of you who are saying, yes, I talk to the business, are you in management? More than likely. And that is the problem. We should have a direct communication to the business. Going through these intermediaries where we have a project manager, we have a manager, this is the problem. Do the managers know to ask the more difficult questions of, let's say somebody said, I want real time. Do the managers know to say how to push back on whether that should be real time or not? They may. But when they say, I want Spark, or that they want Kafka, do the managers know, oh, that's probably not the greatest thing for Kafka? They don't. We don't expect them to. I expect you as data engineers to answer those questions, to ask those questions. And this is why you have to talk to the business. This is an important thing. So here is why. How many of you read your Agile manifesto every night before you go to bed? Yes? Why would you want nightmares? So we should have always been talking to the business. But here's the issue is the Agile Manifesto said we need to have individuals and interactions over tools, processes. So when we said these are values, when we have to choose one or the other, or when we're trying to go fast, what we want to do is we want to have a direct interaction with the person, with the business, rather than saying, here is a hard and fast process that we follow, or a tool that we use. Let's say Jira. So what we really want to be doing is to have those face-to-face conversations. Maybe they're virtual, but they're direct. They're direct conversations that we have with the person who is using that. And then the other part that the Agile Manifesto said was customer collaboration over contract negotiation. How many of you spend more time negotiating a contract over collaborating with a customer and saying, oh, let me put something together. Let's talk about that. Because that customer negotiation, that contract negotiation, teams are spending far too much time on this, and they're spending all of their time negotiating that contract rather than actually collaborating with the customer. The speed difference between those two things is significant. So this is part of how we as data engineers need to do this. So I'm going to leave you with 3 questions, and those 3 questions are, when you talk to the business, you say, what do you need? What is the business value of doing it? And what is the effort? Oftentimes I get pushback on this question, and data engineers say, I don't know what the business value of this is. You shouldn't. You talk to the business will tell you what the business value of that is. That is what is key. So with that, I give you one last ask, and that is to learn and mentor. Hopefully I wanted this to offend you, to push you to action. And I want that action for you to be to learn and mentor. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Andersson. This is for you on behalf of the organizing team. Thank you very much.